Good morning. Uh-oh, I'm not on yet. Good morning. Hey, now I'm on. Welcome to the First Unitarian Church of Salt Lake City on this last Sunday of 2019. We made it. We all made it. Woohoo! I'm glad to see each one of you here today, but I am gladder to see our visitors. If you are visiting with us, you are our honored guest, and I'm so tickled that you're here. I invite you to stop by the welcome table just outside this door in our fellowship hall after worship. Let us get to know you, and let us introduce ourselves to you as well. In today's worship, we're going to talk about one of my very favorite people, Mr. Rogers. But before we do, I'm sad to start our worship on a somber note. My heart is broken this morning at the news that 5 people were killed at the home of a rabbi in Brooklyn, New York last night. This is the 7th act of anti-Semitic violence in New York City in the 7 days of Hanukkah, and it's the 13th in recent weeks. And even though this is a celebration of Jewish resistance and survival, incidents like these remind us that in our country at this time, our Jewish neighbors are very vulnerable, and they need our solidarity. So this morning I light our chalice for the victims of the attacks, for the safety of our own Jewish neighbors here in Utah, and for a swift end to anti-Semitism in the United States and around the world. Let us light the chalice this morning with these words by Adrienne Marie Brown. Things are not getting worse. They are getting uncovered. We must hold each other close and continue to pull back the veil. My hero, Mr. Rogers, would ask, what do you do with the mad that you feel? What do we do with our mad and our sad and our anxious and our scared? One thing we can do is gather together and worship. So I invite you to do that now. We're gonna start our worship with a new hymn, what may be a new hymn to many of you. We can't sing the same old 10 songs all the time, can we? So sometimes we've got to sing a new one. And this is a great hymn for the new year. Ring out wild bells, Lord Alfred Tennyson. I invite you to rise in body and spirit as we sing. David's going to play it through one time so we can hear how it goes, and then we'll all sing it together best we can.
Thank you.
nice one, huh? It's at this time of year when many folks' minds turn toward self-assessment and self-improvement, but the statistics around New Year's resolutions aren't that great. It turns out that those hastily set goals we make while still in the fog of holiday indulgence don't really help us to address our longing to live happier lives. Maybe then you, like me, will find this vocational advice from the Reverend Howard Thurman to be of more use. Don't ask yourself what the world needs. Ask yourself what makes you come alive, and go do that, because what the world needs is people who have come alive. When we're making New Year's resolutions, I think what we all really want is to feel that we're getting more out of life. Something about watching the odometer of our lives roll over, especially when it's a 9 rolling to a 0, makes us pause to take stock. Am I doing my best? Am I making the most of this precious life? What else am I capable of? So as we enter into a spirit of meditation together, I offer you some questions to help you frame resolutions that really make a difference. What really worked for you last year that you can expand in the coming year? Where is there an old wound that you might tend more carefully this year? What do you give to others that you often forget or refuse to give to yourself? What is your very best quality at this stage of your life? And what could you do to cultivate it more intentionally? What makes your heart feel more open? And where can you find more of that? Finally, what makes you come alive? My wish for each of you is that you are able to clearly hear the voice of your heart in the coming year, that you are healthy, happy, and truly alive in the service of the world. Amen. Once upon a time, truth lived in the stars. The truth in the stars glittered and gleamed, and looking up into the sky, you could sometimes catch a glimpse of that marvelous truth. One night, a truth fell from the stars. As it fell, it broke into two pieces. One piece blazed off through the sky, and the other fell straight to the ground. Crow was a lover of shiny things, and as he was flying over the wide ground, naturally, he saw the truth fall. He flew over and found it and picked it up, but he recognized that it was broken and incomplete. "Useless," said he, so he left it on the ground. Not long after, a human being stumbled upon the truth lying on the ground. Humans also love shiny things, so he picked it up. But humans also like broken things. Inquisitive and resourceful, they can always find a use for anything. The human turned over the broken truth and found the words, "You are loved," carved on it. You are loved. It made him feel so good, so he kept it and shared it with the other people in his tribe. The thing sparkled and made the people who had it feel warm and happy. It became their most prized possession, and they called it the truth. But over time, a half-truth will reach out for that which is lost, and it slowly burns at its surroundings. The keepers of this little half-truth began to grow afraid of the neighboring tribe, who didn't have their own glittering truth to protect. And when the neighboring tribe found out about the shiny, gleaming thing, they became jealous and wanted to take it. Soon people were fighting battles over the little truth, trying to capture it for themselves. A little daughter of the humans grew troubled by the growing violence, greed, and destruction in her once peaceful world, and she decided to speak with Old Turtle, ancient and wise. She left her home under cover of darkness and traveled over mountains, seas, and forest land to reach the cave where the old turtle lived. "Old Turtle," she shouted into the dark cave, "why do our people love this truth so? And how can I stop them fighting over it?" From deep within the darkness, Old Turtle crawled ponderously toward the light and the little voice. Blinking slowly in the bright sunlight, the turtle appraised the young questioner. "The truth your people are protecting is only a half-truth. Your people won't find peace until they can find the other half. But most of your people aren't ready to hear this. How can I make them hear me, Turtle?" Old Turtle said, "The broken truth will be mended only when one person meets another, someone from a different place or with a different face or different ways, and sees and hears herself." Old Turtle then reached out and placed a new shiny thing in her hand, a stone with a message inscribed on the surface. The human daughter thanked Old Turtle and went back to her people. She tried to explain that the truth they have is broken and incomplete, but no one would listen or understand. Thank goodness for Crow, flying his daily rounds. He heard the human daughter pleading with the adults to listen to her and recognized what these foolish human people were missing. He flew to the top of a high tower where the broken truth was kept in a place where all could see it and began to caw. The girl understood and climbed up to the high place herself, bringing the stone with her. When she joined her stone to the broken truth in the tower, the pieces fit together perfectly. The rejoined pieces finally shone their full message. You are loved, and so are they. And the people began to understand. I love that. You're just getting us into the land of make-believe. Well, it is that blessed time of the year, that 1 week when I just don't have much to announce, because not that much is going on. Whew, we can all take a breath until it all gets started again next week. I do have one announcement that I'd like to make, and that is that we are always trying to find new things to offer in adult religious education. And in January and February, we're going to be offering something very special. It's a class called Accepting Your Religious Past, and it is open only to people who identify as queer or non-binary. That's a population here in Utah that really needs to work with its religious past, I think, and anywhere in the country, really. So this class is only open to those folks if you identify that way, or if you go to church with somebody who does. We'd love to have you. We're opening the class only up to 15 people. And if we're not able to fill 15 spots here, then we're going to open it to the community. So I encourage you to think about it. If it's a class that would work for you, you can sign up on our website, slcuu.org, under the Religious Education tab, or you can just email me. if it's a little confusing, which it can be sometimes. Okay, so with that one announcement out of the way, we will gratefully accept our offering that goes to support the work of our congregation. Take this moment to welcome one another in fellowship. Well, we still have New Year's to go, but most of the holidays are over, thank goodness, right? I think the big hump to get over was Christmas, and frankly, I don't know many people who aren't glad to see it in the rear view for another year. I always feel a little guilty about that. Wasn't I supposed to be mindfully enjoying the holidays and relishing the time with family and friends? Did I actually do that? Did you actually do that? If you are an extrovert, then yes, probably the family and friends part was the best part. The swirl of laughter and conversation, the busy schedule of parties and get-togethers. If you're an introvert like me, then maybe the best part is when everyone is finally full of cheese and chocolate and settles down quietly to watch a movie. It's the quiet I crave. The dark hours of the morning when snow and coffee are my only companions, or the evening time with a glass of wine or a cup of tea, a knitting project or a book, and quiet, quiet, quiet. No matter how you like to be with people, one of the hardest parts of getting through the holidays these days is dealing with relatives or friends with whom you don't see eye to eye. I'm not sure it's ever really been easy. Were there ever really good old days when politics and religion could calmly be discussed at family gatherings? I mean, I guess it depends on your family, but I have to think that part of the relief at the holidays being over is that those difficult conversations and the wrenching anticipation of them just might be behind us for a few months. What I do know is that even now, the results of the 2016 election are still causing disruption in family relationships. Polls suggest that at least 40% of people report continued family tension over political differences. It's not getting better. And common sense suggests that it's not going to get better this year as we look forward to the possibility of a second term for the disruptor-in-chief. It's hard to imagine anyone wanting to capitalize on that tension, but leave it to the Trump campaign to find a way. A few days before Christmas, my horrified spouse showed me a news article on Facebook about a new series of instructional videos put together by the campaign, teaching supporters how to win arguments against their so-called liberal snowflake relatives during the holidays. Now, friends, for your benefit, I took one for the team and went to the website where I watched one of the videos about the administration's energy policy. It was full of statistics that meant to communicate success, such as coal exports reached their highest level since 2018. I just had to shake my head like, what liberal snowflake is going to hear that statistic as a success? Nobody I know. A campaign spokesperson had this to say about the video series. We've all seen the news articles about liberal snowflakes being afraid to see their MAGA relatives at Christmas or holiday gatherings. So the Trump campaign wants people to be ready. We're not helping snowflakes avoid arguments, we're helping Trump supporters win them. As 2019 draws to a close and 2020 approaches, President Trump and Americans are going to be winning, 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 and then winning some more. There is so much I could say about this. What will be won exactly? What was the goal? Was it to deliberately embarrass or humiliate the opponent across the dinner table? When has anyone's mind ever been changed through humiliation? As a matter of fact, when has anyone's mind ever been changed by having facts, even real facts, thrown up in your face in the pursuit of winning? As if the loser would say, okay, you beat me, you won, now I guess I will have to change my whole worldview. But what stands out most to me is that this is what happens when we do not include emotional intelligence in our list of qualifications for leadership. The humanist philosopher and educator Alain de Botton argues that the emotionally intelligent person knows that love is a skill, not a feeling, and will require trust, vulnerability, generosity, humor, sexual understanding, and selective resignation. Sustained shortfalls in emotional intelligence are, sadly, no minor matter. There are few catastrophes in our own lives or in those of nations that do not ultimately have their origins in emotional ignorance. The lesson that I'm picking up from de Botton is that one of the biggest reasons that our nation is suffering so many catastrophes of conscience at once, homelessness, overwhelming debt, hate crimes, you name it, is that we as a people pay so little attention to developing our emotional intelligence. Rather than producing videos to teach us how to defeat the people we love, why aren't our leaders producing materials to teach us how to love other people more effectively? At least we have the new Mr. Rogers movie, the latest in a slate of Mr. Rogers nostalgia pieces released recently. I went to see it very soon after it came out. You see, Mr. Rogers is also Reverend Rogers, as many people know, and heading into the holiday season seemed like a good time to remind myself of the kind of minister that I aspire to be. But I also went out of a very sharp sense of my own nostalgia, remembering that we Generation Xers who grew up with Mr. Rogers were given a very special emotional education that too many of us have sadly forgotten. Of course, when I was growing up, there were only 4 stations on TV, and remember those days? And most of the day's programming was for adults. News in the morning, soap operas in the afternoon. At night, more news, and then game shows and dramas with bad words and sexy people. But mid-morning, we had Sesame Street and Mr. Rogers, and that was our time. The one time of the day outside of Saturday mornings when the TV belonged to us kids. I knew that Sesame Street was getting us ready for school, and I appreciated that. But Mr. Rogers was something completely different. What was amazing to me about Mr. Rogers, even more so now that I'm an adult and an educator, was that Mr. Rogers talked to adults the same way he talked to children. He talked to people, whether tall and experienced or small and inexperienced, with respect. He used big words without condescension, and he moved slowly and thoughtfully so that anyone could keep up, no matter their size or abilities. Preschool-aged me lived in a world full of people who didn't take me seriously because I was small and a girl, and my mom put my unruly hair into pigtails. People rolled their eyes or patted my head when I talked, and said things like, "You're too young to understand," or "someday when you're older." But not Mr. Rogers. He always had time to explain things clearly, and he enjoyed it. He knew children to be people with complex emotional lives and tremendous capacity for meaning-making, and he took children seriously. He liked getting to know people of all sizes, and most importantly, he liked everyone just the way they were. Now, I grew up in a safe household where my parents stayed together, and we always had something to eat on the dinner table. But it was not without pain. No home is. And the way Mr. Rogers always did the same things in the same order in every show was a beacon of stability. That familiar routine carried out over 30 years, hanging his blazer neatly in the closet and donning the comfy cardigan, taking off the shiny dress shoes and putting on those well-worn sneakers, and that familiar refrain of, "Won't you be my neighbor?" I wonder now how much more I would have clung to Mr. Rogers if I had grown up in a home overshadowed by death or illness, by divorce or domestic violence, by poverty or segregation. Mr. Rogers wasn't afraid to talk about these things with us. One of his mantras, which has become one of my own, was that anything that is human is manageable, mentionable, and anything mentionable is manageable. He knew that as broad as the human experience is, there is nothing that cannot be managed and endured in community. The only unbearable things are the things that we keep to ourselves. We need each other. We need our neighbors, whoever they turn out to be. There's a story that I love about Fred Rogers, about the time he was invited to attend a fundraiser for the second George W. Bush campaign. Of all of the places I can imagine Mr. Rogers being, that would be at the bottom of the list. He was a devoted pacifist who abhorred the Bush administration invasion of Iraq and never endorsed politicians. Yet he'd agreed to go as a favor for a friend. And according to a journalist who was present that night, he spent most of the evening looking miserable. Naturally, the President of the United States bounded up to him and gushed at what a big fan he and Laura were, and would Mr. Rogers mind saying a few words to the crowd during the luncheon? The story he told to the gathered bigwigs was this. "I know of a little girl who was drawing with crayons in school. The teacher asked her about her drawing," he said. And the little girl said, "Oh, I'm making a picture of God." The teacher said, "But no one knows what God looks like." The little girl smiled and answered, "They will now." With that, he asked everyone to think of their own images of God. And he began praying. He talked about listening to the cries of despair in America and about turning those cries into rays of hope. And then when he was finished with his speech, he bolted from the lectern and practically ran out of the venue. Fred told the journalist later, when asked about the unusual event, "I don't want to be an accuser. Other people may be accusers if they want to. That may be their job. I really want to be an advocate for whatever I find is healthy and good. I don't think people change very much when all they have is a finger pointed at them. I think the only way people change is in relation to somebody who loves them. Reading this story made me think, who do I want to be? Do I want to be an accuser? Do I want to be a person who spends my evenings compulsively ranting at strangers on the internet? Or do I want to be a bringer of peace? Do I want to change people? Or do I want to love them? These days, I hear so many well-meaning people of all sorts of political persuasions say that we could fix all the problems in this country if only we could remember how to be kind to one another. Now, setting aside the problem that I'm not really sure we've ever had a period in American history when everyone was kind to everyone else, I do think there's some merit to a social embrace of kindness. But it's also a real trap, and here's why. Because too often we confuse kindness for niceness. I think what people really mean is if we could just be nice to each other, we wouldn't have all this conflict. But why is it that people always trot that out in their own defense when they're being called out for their thoughtless behavior? Why is it that people who are already at a disadvantage are always the ones who are obliged to be nice? I know some really nice racists, and I bet you do too. And when we learn that someone we knew and trusted is guilty of some awful crime or habit, how often do we hear, "But they seemed so nice"? Nice is a trap because it's too often a cover for conflict avoidance. Let me say that again. Nice is a trap because it's too often a cover for conflict avoidance. We avoid conflict when the problem or the problem person in front of us seems too big to manage or too inconvenient to face right now. We avoid conflict when we are afraid of losing ourselves, afraid of being run over, afraid of being seen as morally weak or compromising, afraid of losing touch with this person. How do you stay in relationship with someone who has an opinion that threatens you? So often we hear, we can still be friends with people with whom we disagree. And on the face of it, that's true. I can be friends with people who don't like nuts in their ice cream, or whose favorite color is orange, or who don't like Star Wars. I can even be friends with people who aren't of my chosen political affiliation. But friends, I have to say that it's a lot harder to be in relationship with people who think that because I'm queer, I shouldn't be around children, much less have any of my own. It's hard to be friendly with people who want to pass legislation that keeps their fellow human beings from having access to health care. It's hard to be nice to people who think it's okay to keep children in cages. We are not called to be nice to those people. We are also not called to be rude. We are called to be kind. And kindness is not afraid of conflict. Kindness does not take anyone's crap. Kindness is not run over by meanness because kindness knows how and when to stand its ground. Kindness can say the hard thing that needs to be said because kindness comes from a heart that cannot be threatened. Kindness is not defensive, it is not reactive because it arises from the soul of a person who knows who they are. Kindness knows when to turn and walk away when it meets with a conflict it can't resolve. It knows that some seeds take years to sprout, and it is patient. And when kindness walks away, it takes 100% of its dignity with it. Compare this with niceness. How often, when we're being nice to someone, we end up demeaning ourselves, devaluing our own currency, shutting our own mouths. Kindness is always superior to niceness because kindness has boundaries. Above all, kindness never, ever demeans or dismisses another person, no matter how much they might be asking for it, because kindness's cardinal value is the inherent dignity of the human spirit. Real kindness has both halves of the truth. I am loved, and so are they. It was this kind of kindness, real kindness, that Mr. Rogers taught to a whole generation of people. Kindness that comes from a deep well of self-knowledge, from knowing exactly who you are, even as you're growing into the person you may yet become, the person you aspire to be. What if Mr. Rogers could be there with us at the dinner table as our politically divisive relative tries their hand at some of the winning strategies they saw in that video? Could we borrow his strength? Could we treat others as persons of dignity even when they aren't behaving like it, without losing our own integrity? Could we face conflict from that place of being deeply rooted instead of running from it or dodging it? What would it take for us to do that? To love the difficult person right in front of me, the difficult child, the difficult parent, the difficult boss or employee, the difficult friend on Facebook, or the difficult commenter on a news article. That's a tough one, right? The difficult people around us are still people, and inside each one is a child who is still learning how to be an adult. Because adulthood is a fluid state, not a destination at which we someday arrive. Thank goodness for people like Fred Rogers, who never really grew up at all, and yet somehow is more adulty than any of us. If we can be more like Reverend Rogers in the new year, then perhaps we'll have a chance at saving our nation. Amen. You're going to love our closing hymn. I bet you all know it. But the words are in your order of service if you need it. Let's rise together and sing "Won't You Be My Neighbor." Our closing words are also by the Reverend Fred Rogers. It's such a good feeling to know you're alive. It's such a happy feeling. You're glowing inside, and when you wake up, ready to say, I think I'll make a snappy new day. It's such a good feeling, a very good feeling, a feeling you know that I'll be back when the week is new, and I'll have more ideas for you, and you'll have things you want to talk about. I will too. I think we could have a worship service of just all Mr. Rogers songs, right? Thank you, David, for the delightful music. Now, I know that Mr. Rogers would want you to go out and play in the snow, but first, have a cup of coffee and enjoy each other's company. See you next year.